Coming up on Arirang News, the International Monetary Fund has raised its growth forecast for the South Korean economy this year to 4.3%, which is even higher than the government's forecast, pointing to the country's strong exports. At the Olympics, South Korean swimmer Hwang Sun-woo is going to the final in the men's 100-meter freestyle. The Korean fencers have a chance at gold tonight against Italy, also a crucial match in men's football. And South Korea reports an all-time high number of coronavirus cases for a single day, almost at 1,900. Experts warn that the number will likely get higher by next month as the Delta variant accounts for an increasing proportion of them. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The IMF has raised its economic growth forecast for the Korean economy this year to 4.3%. That's up from its forecast in April of 3.6%. And behind the rise is strength in the country's exports. Kim Sung-min reports.
The International Monetary Fund has sharply revised up South Korea's economic growth forecast for 2021 as the country continues to consolidate its recovery trend on the back of robust exports. In its latest outlook, the IMF expected the country to see 4.3% growth this year, up 0.7 percentage points from its previous forecast in April. The projection is the highest among the figures given by some other organizations, including the South Korean government and OECD. The government projected 4.2% growth and the OECD 3.8%. The IMF also raised next year's growth outlook for Korea to 3.4% from the previous 2.8%. The increase comes as Asia's fourth largest economy sees a steady recovery with solid exports of chips and automobiles, as well as improving domestic demand. Its GDP for the first half of this year jumped 3.9% on year, higher than the Bank of Korea's projection. Exports during the first 20 days in July rose more than 32% on year as demand for chips, autos, and petroleum products continued to increase. After the report was released, the Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi wrote on Facebook that the projection suggests international recognition for the country's excellent economic resilience and policies. Hong also pledged continuous economic measures as well as virus prevention efforts, mentioning how the country is once again facing challenges from the fourth COVID-19 wave. Meanwhile, for the global economy, the IMF maintained its earlier projection of 6% growth. However, developing economies' growth was downgraded by 0.4 percentage points from 3 months ago. The IMF cut its projection for China by 0.3 percentage points and slashed India's by 3 percentage points. The report suggests that the slow rollout of vaccines in developing nations could have been a factor, which could mean that the pandemic is widening inequality. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
And as Korea battles its most severe wave of the pandemic yet, consumer confidence is falling. According to the Bank of Korea, the Consumer Sentiment Index for July dropped to 103.2, down from June by more than 7 points. It's still above 100, so there are more optimists than pessimists about the economy, but the BOK says the fourth wave has had an impact. The index had been improving for 6 straight months. South Korea's population continues to shrink as it has every month for a year and a half. The number of babies born was down in May, and the number of people getting married continues to decline as well. It's a phenomenon that threatens the country's economic growth, especially with a huge portion of the country nearing retirement. Song Kyung reports.
South Korea saw more deaths than births in May. Statistics Korea stated Wednesday that there were 22,052 births in May, down 3.5% from the previous year. It marked the lowest figure for any May since the relevant data was first compiled 40 years ago, and also marks the 66th consecutive month of on-year decline. Meanwhile, the number of deaths increased by 5%, causing a decline in population for the 19th consecutive month.
There are some factors dragging down fertility rates. The number of women aged 25 to 39 has decreased largely due to government-led family planning in the past. And the continuous decline in the number of marriages since 2012 has also taken its toll on the birth rate because in Korea, most births in Korea occur following marriage.
In fact, the number of marriages in May dropped by 11% on year to 60,153. On a yearly basis, the number of marriages has been on a continuous decline since 2012. Experts say that declining birth rate could pose a threat to South Korea's economy, mainly because, at least for now, the productivity growth rate is not good enough to cover the loss from labor growth due to a shrinking population.
We see population growth, meaning an increase in labor population and the productivity growth rate, as major drivers for economic expansion. When the labor growth rate becomes negative, then the economic growth rate is highly likely to decrease, unless productivity efficiency is high enough to cover manpower loss. South Korea's technological advances have improved a lot, but not as much as other advanced economies. Legal and regulatory problems also exist. South Korea's productivity level is not high enough. This is the problem.
The expert added that since the growth in productivity level can replace the loss in working age population, measures are needed to address the issue, and the government could also consider accepting a greater number of immigrant workers to boost Korea's workforce. 서은경, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Korea's home prices, especially in Seoul, were already soaring, and they've only gone up further in the pandemic. Many young would-be buyers especially feel that home ownership may be out of reach. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said today that he thinks prices will soon start falling, and he reiterated that the government is going to keep working to address the situation through policy and to follow through on its plan to boost supply. Ji-young has more.
South Korea's housing market is getting hotter than ever despite efforts by the government over the past couple of years. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi, in a joint briefing with related ministers on Wednesday, once again vowed to go all out to tame the country's runaway house prices by focusing on increasing supply.
Our number one goal would be to supply more homes in the country. The government will supply houses according to the plan and will strive to provide them as soon as possible. Also, we will be open to all possibilities to secure new housing sites.
Hong also said it's not the time to buy houses out of fear of being priced out of the market because there's chance that house prices could fall by more than market expectations. He said the reasons for that include a potential rise in interest rates and the start of public housing subscriptions in the second half of the year. The Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Roh Hyung-wook, also pledged to strictly carry out the plan to build some 2,050,000 new public housing units across the country by 2030, including 1.8 million units in the capital area. It includes finalizing the district plan by the end of this year for some 240,000 new public houses at designated areas, including the 6 sites for the third stage of South Korea's New Town Development Plan. But an expert says as it takes at least a couple of years for any planned houses to be built, more houses should be put up for sale, including those from multiple homeowners.
I have a positive view of the government's announcement to enforce the housing supply plan, but as it takes time, some changes in the policies are needed to raise the number of properties on sale in the market.
Another expert says there are supply shortages because of the capital gains tax.
Transaction tax, including capital gains tax on home sales, is too heavy compared to other OECD member countries. Homeowners cannot sell their properties because of the considerable amount of tax imposed on gains.
The announcement also includes plans to prevent an influx of liquidity by keeping the rise in household debt below 6%, as well as continuing the all-out war against property speculation. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we work. Millions upon millions of people have been working from home, and face-to-face service jobs have in some cases disappeared altogether to be replaced by automation and other forms of technology. It's looking more and more likely that some of these changes to the job market will be permanent, and so that means uncertainty in a lot of people's futures. Today, we have our Pei Eun-ji here in the studio to tell us more about how the pandemic has affected the labor market in South Korea. Eun-ji, good to have you back.
Good afternoon.
Well, as I was just saying, there have been a lot of changes in the labor market. Some of them could be permanent, like maybe more automation and less in-person customer service. Tell us about that.
That's right. Like you just said, a lot of small businesses are now turning to automation because not only does it reduce risk in the pandemic, but it also saves them money. Here we're talking about people who run coffee shops, small restaurants, and so on, who are considered to be self-employed. If an employee tests positive for COVID-19, a business might be disruptive for a few days, or even close down for a short period of time. But the benefit of machines and robots is that they can't be infected. The latest data from Statistics Korea clearly shows that small businesses are hiring fewer people. Just last month, the number of self-employed people who are not employing others was up by 112,000 compared to the same month the year before. This figure has been rising for 29 months in a row. So, of all the self-employed people in the country, only 23% have employees. And this is the lowest figure since 1999.
So with technology, employers see a way to reduce risk, also to save money. But there's also a segment of customers who actually like the non-contact forms of service, like in a coffee shop where you can go and order from a machine. And we also see the rise of some kinds of convenience stores that don't actually have any staff in them. That's something that the pandemic may have accelerated.
That's right. Some convenience stores in Korea are going unmanned at least at night. They have staff during the day, but from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., customers serve themselves. You go into the store at night by simply inserting your credit card into the card reader at the door, and you use the self-checkout when you leave. The convenience store chain eMart24 says out of about 5,500 of its franchise stores across the country, around 150 stores are operated in this way. Even though they're unmanned, the stores also sell alcoholic beverages. This beer fridge has a QR scanner to verify your age using your driver's license, and then you put your credit card into the machine to open the door. But the coolest thing is that to pay, you don't have to scan your beer. The camera sees which product you've chosen and charges them to your card when you close the door.
We have decided to use this vending machine to provide convenience to customers and to run our stores more efficiently.
The company also said it plans to expand the use of this machine to sell products other than alcohol. This could pave the way for retailers to launch fully unmanned convenience stores running 24/7.
So, Eun-ji, from what you're saying, and that does sound very interesting, automation is speeding up, a lot of innovation, but that might not be good for the job market, at least in the short term. Tell us about the situation in that regard and what the government might be able to do about it.
Well, Devin, since the pandemic hit, the country has seen a high rate of long-term unemployment. Last month, the number of people who have spent more than 4 months looking for a job amounted to 357,000. Compared to before the pandemic in February 2020, this is an increase of 26.4%. But even worse in June, the number of people who were able to work but had given up and left the labor force altogether stood at 583,000. That's an increase from a year earlier of 46,000. The figure has been recording an all-time high for 16 months in a row now. An economist from the Bank of Korea says it's really important to have these people engaged in the workforce as soon as possible. And he expressed hope that automation can actually create new jobs, so the government should help workers who are at a high risk of being replaced to find jobs related to this field.
For instance, with more self-ordering kiosks, the manufacturers will need to hire more people. People who lost their job can maybe get a job there, or if not, get other jobs that have been newly created through this kind of automation. So the government needs to help out these people move on to a new job.
So, Eunji, it sounds like people who have lost their jobs because of automation or issues in the pandemic should think about acquiring new skills that could transfer into perhaps even an entirely different industry. What other changes are we seeing in the labor market?
Well, another issue in the labor market is that large businesses have started hiring again, but smaller ones have not been able to. This shows how the pandemic has widened this gap between large companies and small companies. In Korea, large businesses are defined as those with more than 300 employees. A report by the country's central bank shows that employment at large businesses increased by 6.4% last month compared to before the pandemic. Meanwhile, the workforce at smaller businesses shrank by 0.8%.
Big companies getting bigger creates higher barriers to entry for small businesses. This will have a negative impact on businesses hiring new people.
He said the government should find ways to help SMEs hire more people. Already in the pandemic, we've seen, for example, bigger relief payments going to companies that keep their employees. There are also new opportunities opening up for training.
Well, Eunji, you've described some things that are very interesting and exciting in terms of innovation, also some things that we all want to be aware of when it comes to employment and the labor market. Very thorough reporting today, Eunji. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now to the Olympics, and South Korea's new swimming sensation Hwang Sun-woo is making headlines again. He's become the first Korean swimmer to make it to the final of the men's 100-meter freestyle. In the semifinal this morning, he made a time of 47.56 seconds to place fourth in the round and setting a new Asian record. He was just 4/100ths of a second behind the third-place swimmer, so hopes are high for a good result in the final on Thursday morning. After this, he still has two more events left, the 50-meter freestyle and 4x200-meter relay final. If he makes it to the podium, he'll be only the second Korean to win a medal in swimming after Park Tae-hwan. In Olympic fencing, the South Korean men's saber team has made it to the finals, meaning they'll face Italy for the gold medal at 7:30 Korea time. In a competitive semi-final match, Oh Sang-wook, Gu Bon-gil, Kim Jong-hwan, and Kim Jun-ho beat Germany 45-42. In tonight's final, they'll be looking to defend Korea's champion status in Team Sabre. Korea won gold in 2012, the last time the event was held at the Olympics. And in just a few minutes, the South Korean men's football team will play their last group stage match, this one against Honduras, starting at 5:30 p.m. They're currently in the top of their group on a goal difference of +3, meaning they only need to tie to qualify for the quarterfinals. But a win would be a boost to the team's pride, since Honduras is the team that eliminated Korea in the 2016 games. Honduras are strong, especially in offense, having beaten New Zealand in the round before, the team South Korea lost to. So Team Korea will need to be at their best to get the win. And South Korea's archers have been the country's biggest success story at the Olympics so far, having already won 3 gold medals. In training for the Games, they were able to use some cutting-edge technology developed by one of South Korea's biggest companies. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
South Korean archers dominated Tokyo 2020, winning 3 gold medals so far. And along with the athletes' efforts, artificial intelligence technology has supported their training. Korea's auto giant Hyundai Motor Group supported the athletes by providing 5 cutting-edge technologies. The first is a face recognition system. When the athlete is pulling the bow, a machine analyzes their face, checking the heartbeat. This measurement can help them calm down and concentrate on the game. And when the athlete shoots, the score is automatically recorded in the program. Deep learning system is used to automatically edit the videos of the athletes' training and analyze their habits and weak points. A shooting machine can sort out and remove poor quality arrows. And a 3-dimensional printer makes a grip for the bow that best fits the athlete's hands. Hyundai Motor Group and Korea Archery Association started their cooperation after the 2016 Rio Olympics, aiming to apply technologies used for future vehicles to archery training. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea today reported its highest number of coronavirus cases yet, just shy of 1,900. Last week, the Delta variant made up more than half of all new cases. And with people traveling throughout the country on vacation, experts warn that case numbers could rise to 2,500 a day before they come back down. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea on Wednesday reported 1,896 new cases of COVID-19, marking yet another all-time high. All but 73 of Wednesday's cases were locally transmitted. This is the first time for local transmissions to surpass 1,800. The capital region hasn't seen any significant drop in the number of infections since being put under the highest level of social distancing restrictions earlier this month.
It's been 2 weeks since social distancing level 4 was implemented in the metropolitan area. While monitoring the effects of the measures, we may have to review whether stronger restrictions are needed.
Concerns are also growing in other parts of the country. Over the past week, 1 in 3 new infections were reported outside the Greater Seoul area. Health experts warn that with the holiday season due to end in the coming days, the number of infections will likely peak in early to mid-August, even reaching 2,500 cases a day. Health authorities are also on high alert due to the rapidly spreading Delta variant. Last week, the Delta strain made up 51% of new infections and 88% of the country's new variant cases. As South Korea is well into the 4th wave of the pandemic with the spread of this variant, studies show that it is important to refrain from lifting restrictions prematurely. Researchers at the University of East Anglia's Norwich Medical School have found that more infections could lead to the formation of new variants that are more resistant to vaccines. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum says that vaccine maker Moderna will start delivering more doses to South Korea next week after a delay due to production issues. According to the Prime Minister, in an online meeting Tuesday with Moderna, the company promised to deliver a substantial amount of its delayed batch for July next week and to deliver next month's batch on time. With that, the government has said those in their 50s will receive shots as previously planned, and it'll aim to inoculate people aged 18 to 40 by September. Currently, just under 35% of the total population have received at least one dose of a vaccine, and nearly 14% have been fully vaccinated. In other news, now that South Korea and North Korea have restored their communication lines, Seoul's Unification Ministry says it will speed up its plans to establish systems for virtual meetings, especially during the pandemic. An official from the ministry told Yonhap News Agency Wednesday that reviving inter-Korean dialogue is first on the agenda, and that Seoul will suggest the idea to Pyongyang. In fact, the ministry in April completed a virtual conference system for that purpose at a cost of almost $350,000. According to the ministry, there should be no technical issues in holding a virtual meeting with the North at some point in the near future. The United States has welcomed North Korea's decision to reopen hotlines with the South, the State Department describing it as a step in the right direction. Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The U.S. has endorsed the resumption of dialogue between the two Koreas, welcoming Pyongyang's reopening of direct communication lines between the two sides. After a breakfast meeting in Washington Tuesday, Kurt Campbell, the White House policy coordinator for the Indo-Pacific, said the U.S. is supportive of Seoul's dialogue and communication with the North. His remarks come after the regime reopened the hotlines it had unilaterally severed some 13 months ago. The U.S. State Department also welcomed the move in response to a written inquiry from the Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency. It described it as a, quote, positive measure that's essential for establishing internal peace and the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin also highlighted that the U.S. door is open for dialogue with the North while answering questions Tuesday in Singapore. Earlier, Austin also stressed the importance of implementing Washington's practical diplomacy with North Korea at the same time as applying UN-led international sanctions on the regime. He also noted how Washington is again taking a leading role at the UN Security Council, including on the enforcement of resolutions on North Korea. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gave a speech Tuesday at an event for war veterans, but unlike last year, he did not mention self-defensive nuclear deterrence. According to state media, Kim said the North's forces are fully ready to deal with any threats, but he did not have any direct messages for the South or the U.S. Observers say Kim appeared keen to avoid harsh remarks following the restoration the same day of the inter-Korean communication lines. Regarding COVID-19, Kim admitted that the North is in a prolonged and difficult lockdown. The heat this summer is killing huge numbers of fish at fish farms along South Korea's east coast. According to the province of Gyeongsangbuk-do, local fish farms in Uljin County and Yeongdeok County have lost 57,000 fish since last weekend alone. In just one day, they lost around 15,000. The heat has dramatically raised the temperature in the fish pools, which are on land, and the fish are harmed by the clash of warm water and the cold water flowing in from the sea. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.